Hello everyone. My name is Joshua. I'm the founder and director of El Terreno. It's great to have you all here on another internship presentation. Today, we're going to be speaking with Jasha from the Netherlands, who's been with us for the last 6 weeks, looking at the lives of local farmers, the challenges they face, and what are some of the solutions that could be brought to them to help both improve their lives and in the long term regenerate ecosystems and reduce the level of migration. Yash has been working very, very hard over the last few weeks, and it's a pleasure to introduce him and his fantastic work that he's done over this time. Over to you.
Yes, thank you very much, Joshua. It's been a pleasure working here over the past 6 weeks, and to show you all what the results are that I've come up with. Thank you all for attending as well for this online presentation, and let's get started. The presentation as a whole is towards holistic agriculture, and it started with doing research and eventually coming to certain solutions for people here, combining what they already have and what they had in the past as well. To start, a short introduction on who I am for the people here who might not know. My name is Jasha. I'm 25 years old. Usually live in the Netherlands, and there I'm a master's student in industrial ecology. And for the past 6 weeks, as Joshua said, I've been doing an internship in agriculture at El Terreno here. Then the contents. Now, we've just had a small introduction. We will go on until the central idea of the investigations, then to the three main problems I identified, the common denominator in these problems, some proposed solutions, and I will talk about the workshop we had 2 days ago, last Tuesday, with some local farmers here. To start with the investigation. The investigation consisted of literary research to start with, and then mainly with interviews with local farmers to learn about the agricultural practices in Attendaue. This was mainly the qualitative part of the internship, and I will elaborate more on the quantitative part as well in a minute. From these interviews,
sorry to interrupt, Yasha. You're not sharing the screen at the moment, by the way. I'm not sure if you're meant to be.
Yeah, I'm meant to be. Thank you. I think it stopped by itself. All right, can you see the screen now?
Perfect.
Okay, great. Really quickly, this was the introduction slide. I think everybody got it. This is what we're doing in this presentation: investigation, three main problems, common denominator, proposed solutions, and the workshop in the end. And this was where we left with the investigation. As I said, this is mainly the qualitative part of the investigation, and I will elaborate on the more quantitative part in a minute. So from the interviews, three main problems were identified. The first being economic issues, the second health issues, and the third environmental issues. These are all problems that were mainly spoken about by the farmers themselves when asked like how they perceived the area around them, how they perceived it over the past years, and what they experienced. These three problems work as a qualitative substantiation for the quantitative analysis I will now start talking about, starting with the archetype distribution. Because before we can dive into the economic side of things, it's important to see what type of farmers are working in Attendaue. And it was clearly visible that there's two main extremes in the way of working. One is the more conventional way, using a lot of mechanization, fungicides, pesticides, and chemical fertilizer, buying of seeds, and monocultivation. In the report, this is also called externally influenced, as can be seen in the linear graph above. And this is what is mostly practiced in Attendaue actually. Then there also is the traditional way, which is mainly as it was a few decades ago before the agrarian reform. In this way of farming, it was more about association of crops, rotation of crops, organic fertilizer using of their own seeds, and more biodiversity included in the system. When these archetypes were defined, it was possible to place the farmers that were spoken to in the interviews on the linear distribution line as can be seen above in this slide. Here we see how some farmers are more like on the externally influenced side, which is the same as the conventional side, and some are more to the traditional side, practicing mostly a combination of these two practices, but leaning towards one direction or another. With this information, it was possible to start 2 comparative case studies. Here we see an example from the comparative case study on corn. Here we see that for corn, 2 farmers were compared. One who produced in a more conventional way and one who produced in a more traditional. In these 2 graphs, it's only the expenses they have in their farming practices that are shown. And we can see that for the conventional way, a lot of the expenses go to chemicals, almost 67%. For labor, this is around 12%. And for the products they use, as like buying the tractor or the seed they use, it's around 21%. Then seeing the traditional approach to agriculture, a really different buildup of expenses can be seen, with mainly costs going to the products, the tractors and the seed, a far smaller amount going to chemicals, and more or less similar amount being distributed to the labor cost. These 2 graphs only show the expenses, and in the next slide I will show the total. Here we can see again the conventional here and the traditional system here, wherein we can see that most of the costs and expenses are input and throughput, and these are almost similar in both systems. What is a really big difference, however, is that for the chemical cost in the conventional system, it makes up a big section here. And in the more traditional system, it's only a slight section here. And what is mainly interesting here is that in the system with more chemicals, they do produce more or more profitable harvests, which results in bigger revenues. However, because they pay so much for the chemicals, the revenues in the end lead to almost the same profits in both systems. Which brings us to the question, where does the money come from? Because if farmers are paying a lot of these costs, they can also use this money for other causes, or maybe they get this money from loans, as actually a lot indicated during the workshop last Tuesday, on which they pay interest, which might result in this profit even being lesser than shown here. And this all comes down to the rentability of both systems, which we can see is a lot higher in the traditional system than it is in the conventional system. Resulting in the question, why would you want to continue in this way? Mostly probably because farmers don't really see the chemical costs. They only see the revenues of their outputs and the big harvest from using chemicals. Another important aspect to this whole situation is the future predictions, because chemical usage degrades the soil on which farmers farm, and a lot of indicated in the interviews that the soil used to provide better harvest when they started using chemicals. But over the years, the soil has degraded and degraded and degraded, resulting in lesser and lesser harvest. Which could be, and I have to say these graphs are an illustration, these are not based on actual data, but it could result in maybe their harvest looking like this in the past, going on to where we are now, and maybe like this in the future, while a more traditional approach provides a steady harvest since the soil isn't degrading over time. All in all, these are 4 oversights of the buildup of the costs of either traditional corn production, conventional corn production, and the same for potatoes in a traditional and conventional way. And here we can see that in the input and throughput cost, the conventional way often is a little bit more expensive, but this is all made up by the far higher costs when it comes to the chemicals. We can see here $90 as opposed to $800, and here $300 as opposed to almost $4,000. Big differences. So from the economical side of things, these are reasons to maybe change perspectives and look from a new way into how farmers are distributing their expenses and their revenues. Then we can also compare these economic quantitative issues back to the qualitative issues we found in interviews. Seeing the health issues, seeing that the use of chemical products in agriculture can result in serious health issues such as respiratory problems, skin problems, and on the long term, even internal problems. What is more interesting here that in the questionnaire on the workshop last Tuesday, we asked the farmers, how many of you have experienced problems with your health through the usage of chemicals? On which a lot of them answered to have. Then moving on towards another one of the qualitative aspects, the environmental issues. Also something a lot of the farmers indicated to have experienced problems with during the interviews. In the long term, using chemicals can affect a large scale effects on the environment and biodiversity, such as soil erosion, quantity and quality of water, and loss of native plants and birds. Important here is also that these native plants and birds often worked as a natural pest control. A problem a lot of farmers indicated to have now is like a certain worm getting into the corn, which used to be taken care of by typical birds, but because native plants are being cut down or being destroyed by the chemicals, these birds are lesser seen, making the worms more bad. Also, for this topic, we asked the farmers in the questionnaire, have you experienced problems with the soil or the water in relation to using chemicals? Also here, a lot of them answered yes. This brings us to the common problem. How do we relate all these three aspects into one common denominator? Well, as you might have expected, chemical use is seen as one of the big common denominators here, since the economic problems, the health problems, and environmental problems, while also maybe related to other, in the context of Attenborough, they do all find a relation to the use of chemicals as well. What is important here, mainly for the economic and environmental problems, is that it goes one step deeper, because the use of chemicals degrades the soil, and the degradation of the soil is often the deeper cause for the economic and the environmental problems. And towards the solutions. To find some solutions on these problems described, it's of course really important to note that there's no perfect solution. These problems have developed themselves over decades and can be solved within 1, 2, or maybe 10 years. It needs time. So these solutions are mainly based on some short-term solutions which can be implemented directly, some long-term solutions to hopefully change things over time for the better. Here in the short-term solutions are more easy to implement, could in practical sense be implemented the next day and take little effort. These are the use of protective clothing to protect one's health when using the chemicals, because a lot of farmers have indicated to not be doing this, probably resulting in the health issues indicated. The second is using the minimal amount of chemicals. It was also found that a lot of farmers tend to use as much as possible with the idea that the more the better, but this is not always the case. So try to use as minimal of the chemicals as possible. Then there are also two long-term solutions who are argued to have a far bigger effect, but take more time and more effort to implement. One is use native plants to prevent erosion. Since agrarian reform, a lot of farmers have cleaned their lands, meaning they have cut down all the trees, clearing all the space for agriculture only, resulting in less roots, keeping the soil together, resulting in more erosion, mainly when it rains. Replanting these native plants can revitalize the ecosystem, create better soil, and bring back the balance through natural birds and insects living in these trees. A second one is use more organic fertilizer. As said before, a lot of the problems are argued to start with the soil. So when the soil is healthy, this allows more things to grow healthy in the soil and more organic production as well. So the use of more organic fertilizer instead of the chemical fertilizers people are using now is argued to have a big effect on the long term. Then there are two ideas for future research. These take a little bit more thinking about and ways in which they could actually work in practice, but are nice ideas to think about. One of them is production of organic fertilizer in Minga. For people in this presentation who don't know what Minga is, it is a concept practiced in Atandawa widely, wherein families or neighbors, people from the community help each other in the sense that everybody can make use of this practice when they need it sometime, and they can all put in their effort together to realize a bigger goal. When they would use this Minga concept to produce organic fertilizer, everybody could lay in some of the materials they have to make this and get something out of it. Of course, this is difficult since it has to be organized really clearly and to see who gives what and gets what to make the system work in a coherent way. And the second idea is possibly a pilot farm, wherein two productions can be held next to each other, one in the more conventional and one in the more traditional way, to really show people the difference. See within 1, 2, 3, up until 5 years or more, how the soil changes when you start practicing traditional agriculture or more holistic way of agriculture next to the conventional way. Maybe even taking soil samples every half a year. Then lastly, an example. On one of the trips with Sebastian, the mentor for this project, we went to Pimbalo, which is a community up in the mountains. And this community has some of the problems in Attenborough are solved in really creative ways. They have a communal water reserve, assuring like water availability throughout the year, a nursery forest, and produce organic fertilizer in Minga. Then, to conclude, last Tuesday a workshop was held, wherein this presentation, as I'm giving now, was also given to local farmers from the community. 14 farmers attended the presentation. And yeah, it started with the same presentation. Then we had a questionnaire in which I will show the results in a minute. And after that, we had a workshop on how to produce organic fertilizer. To start with the response on the questionnaires, I already showed two before, where I showed you the health issues and environmental issues awareness. What is important side note with these questionnaires is that they were held after the presentation, so their way of thinking might have been a little bit influenced when they were answering these questionnaires. But on the other hand, it's a nice way to show if the presentation got it. What's interesting here is that this first question, they were asked what is their biggest expense when it comes to farming. And most of them indicated that the use of chemicals is indeed the biggest expense. Next to this was seed, using machinery and other input costs, and none indicated the use or the labor to be one of the highest. Then the other question was, from a selection of three, what would, in the opinion of the farmers, be the best way to revitalize the land and get to a more holistic way of agriculture? Most of them indicated that planting native plants and trees would be the best way to do this. The second option was rotation of crops, wherein the same amount of land is used, but the different crops have different properties for the soil to keep it healthy throughout the year. And the third one was association of crops, wherein certain crops are cultivated on the same piece of land next to each other, enhancing each other's resilience and way of growing. And lastly, the workshop, which was led by Sebastian. Short video on it here. Let's give an impression. In this video, we can see the workshop by Sebastian. Sebastian, at the end, showed the local farmers who attended the meeting how they can make organic fertilizer themselves, and that it's actually a process which is moderately simple with products from their own land. It just needs an inoculator, such as a legume, some kind of straw, and like in this example, manure from animals. Three products which are mainly available on most farmers' lands without cost. It just takes some effort to make it, but in comparison to the chemical fertilizer they're mainly using now, it could be it could be a big help in the practices. This was all, and if you have any questions, this is the time. Thank you.
Thank you, Jasha. Excellent presentation. Thank you very much. Always been very impressed with how clear and concise you are with your presentations and your communication as a whole. So thank you for that. It was really insightful. So we've got another 10 minutes if we have some questions. I have one for you, Jasha. If you had longer, maybe twice as long to continue doing this and focus more on the research, what would you do? What would you do? How would you take this research further to get an even more detailed understanding of the issues at hand?
Yeah, thank you. That's a nice question. Also because I would like to do that actually. I would start by getting a lot more information and data, because like now the model is designed, so putting in the data is fairly easy. So having a lot more conversations with a lot more people to see if these results, which are now based on 2 case studies, also hold up when we would base it on, let's say, 20 case studies in the area. That would be a first one. And I think, like, as I said, the graphs I showed with the soil degradation and production over time, those are just illustrative, because those are not based on actual data, but supported by the qualitative data, because people say their soil degrades. But to actually test So to actually try to find a way to gather this data over time and see if this holds up would be really interesting as well.
Thank you.
Hi, Jasha, and everyone. I have a question for you. What do you think about the responsibility of the companies and corporations that made and manufacture this type of chemicals that use widely in Latin America? That even some of these molecules are prohibited in some countries, in Europe and United States. What do you think about these two or three corporations that made these manufacture these molecules, and they don't take care about the health of the people and the environment, soil? What do you think about that? And what do you, in your personal uh, thoughts and feel, what do you think about do something about that in the companies that more are foreigners companies, especially from the US and Europe, that own the patents of these molecules? What do you think about that? They don't have responsibility here in Latin America about nothing.
Yeah,
What do you think about it?
very interesting question. I think with these companies, it's always difficult because you see them all over the world, and they rather not take any responsibility. Honestly, what first comes to mind for me is that I compare them almost to like tobacco companies. They just want to earn money and they don't care how they do it. And changing them from this work is from outside of these companies, I think. So changing from within the community, showing within the communities that they don't need to believe everything these companies say and that there are other ways as well. And maybe then after you change it from like a bottom-up perspective, these companies will want to earn money. So if the main perspective changes to not using the chemical products, they will maybe change their ways to producing products that are more suitable for the new way of agriculture. That's what I mainly think about them. But yeah, I have very little trust in talking with these companies and changing their minds like just that. They need to be incentivized with economic perspectives. That's just sadly how they are.
Thanks.
Okay, so we've got just a couple of minutes left. I've got one more question, but does anyone want to jump in before me? Okay, so I would ask you then, Jasha, for future interns who might want to come and continue with this project, what advice would you give them? What direction would you give them?
I would start as well with the same advice you gave me in the beginning. Start by really getting a comprehensive idea and image of the situation here before jumping to conclusions. So I would definitely say that as well. And then I would try to say like look at or elaborate on this perspective or look at other ways of reasoning around this perspective. Because I think during the community meeting we had last Tuesday, people really like noticed like, okay, there might be some other ways in the ways we have been doing things over the past decades. And maybe they just need to hear the same thing, but from other perspectives more times before they think, okay, now I've had enough of it. Now I'm going to change the way I'm doing things. So maybe if somebody would come and speaks about the water availability, and then somebody goes further into the environmental issues or in the health issues, I think there's like tons of directions you can go in, but really try to have more of these researches and presentations with the local community, really with people, because I think that did the most. And yeah, maybe after the fifth presentation, you have one farmer who says, okay, now I'm done with people telling me I need to change. I'm going to do something. I'm going to do it in a different way and change for the better. So I think, yeah, that would be it.
Great. And one quick follow-on question from your answer. What were some of the conclusions you might have jumped to if you didn't spend that time getting to know the community first?
the connection was not really great, but I think I got it. Like what conclusion might have I jumped to if I didn't look to the community first, right? Yeah. Okay, great. I might have just like jumped to the pilot farm and worked that out because like that was one initial idea. But then I think I would have lost the perspective of how to communicate it with the community, because now the way it went, I had these interviews which were really like deep in the sense that we talked about a lot of things, and I really got a coherent idea on how to do the presentation I had last Tuesday, which Bastian helped a lot as well. So if I would have jumped immediately to designing a pilot farm, I might have done it from a more, I think, Western perspective without really including how people here are generally motivated.
Great. Well, thank you, Jasha, on behalf of everyone at El Terreno, and even more so for the farmers of Atandao of taking this project one step further along, of really listening and showing curiosity and interest in farmers and how they live their lives and what their needs are, and providing the support and using your skills and knowledge to begin looking for other options, because often they're so busy in their day to day. And as you've already mentioned, there's various influences, such as the companies who have these agrochemicals, which is not in their interest to support local farmers and their needs. So thank you for championing those needs, and I wish you a really positive future going forwards. And I hope that this has also been useful and valuable for you as a young professional stepping into this world and developing your skills. So
thank you very much, Joshua. Thank you as well for the guidance throughout the whole project, for the help whenever needed, for thinking along with me whenever needed. This was really, really nice. And I want to give the same thanks to Sebastian, who was a great mentor from the beginning, helped me a lot during the interviews. I would not have been able to get the results I got without you. And also really during the presentation, I think I managed to get something across, but you really managed to motivate the people there and activate their way of thinking during the presentation. So I definitely would not have gotten the results I got without your help. Thank you very much. And I see Sebastian has a question.
Yeah, so we have about 1 minute left. So over to you, Sebastian.
Yeah, only give my thanks. Muchas gracias, Chani, Jasha, for your focus, your passion, very passionate and sensitive to put the professionalism here in this investigation and work with a lot of respect with the locals, and thanks a lot, Jasha.
Thank you as well, Sebastian. It was an amazing experience.
Great. Thank you, everybody, for joining. Until the next presentation, wishing you all the best. We'll be in touch. Ciao.
Bye.